and welcome to lesson 15 of this Elizabeth I GCSE lesson series, which is going to focus on Elizabethan leisure time, spectator sports, and outdoor pursuits. The piece of music there was called Light Cavalry, and it puts one in the mood for some jolly good, rip-roaring Elizabethan outdoor fun. You will need to be on page 32 of your lesson notes booklet, which should have been sent to you. It will be on Pod, it will be on class charts, or guess what? You can access it in the description at the bottom of this video. So, without further ado, let's delve into what Elizabethans did in their spare time. You should see on page 32 that you have an excerpt from the textbook that looks a lot like this, and you will see some people there playing real tennis. Not the sort of tennis that you might see at Wimbledon or in the US Open. Now, this is real tennis, Tudor style, which is kind of a mix between tennis, badminton, and squash. And the first thing we're going to think about is the type of sports that Tudors played. Some of these sports they played just amongst themselves recreationally, and some sports were spectator sports. But these sports were all very different from the type of sports that we might play today or we might watch and be spectators of in modern Britain. Have a little look at this comical clip that outlines the way in which football was very different in Tudor times compared with now.
Way back in Tudor times, football was really violent.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined here by a player often described as being to football what Jermaine Defoe is to football. It's Jermaine Defoe. So, Jermaine, big match in prospect today. I believe this is the first time that you've faced the Tudors.
Who?
The Tudors, from the Tudor era.
What?
Oh, here they come now. So, Ken, how are the Tudors feeling about the match today?
Well, pretty excited. The whole village has turned out today, so...
Great to have so much support.
they're not supporters, they're playing.
The entire village?
That's right, yeah. In Tudor football, the whole village takes on the whole of another village. Although apparently today we're going to be playing against two villages, Tot and Ham.
Tottenham?
Yeah, that's what he said, mate. Oh, nice to meet you, by the way. What number are you?
18.
All right. I'm 316, he's 317, he's 318, and then we lost count.
Yeah, we're playing classic Tudor football rules today. It's basically as many men as you can muster. You've got to kick the ball through the cemetery gates of the opposing village. It goes without saying violence, foul play, bad language are strictly encouraged. Except we can't use weapons.
Health and safety gone mad?
Don't get me started.
I don't suppose this is the type of football you're used to playing, Jermaine.
Nonsense! Football's football, right, Jermaine? What position do you play?
Striker.
Yeah, well, I'm a striker too. And I'm going to strike you, and I'm probably going to strike him, and I may headbutt him if I can reach him.
He will as well, he's a nutter.
Right, well, I think we're just about to kick off now because here comes the ref with the ball.
Yo, that's the ball. Yeah, it's your classic inflated pig's bladder. Oh, sorry, there's still some blood on that.
What, from the pig?
No, from the last team we beat. And when I say beat, I mean beat.
Leave it to the kick-off, Ken.
Now listen, I want a good, clean game, but I'm told that's not going to happen, so I'm out of here. Good luck, Jermaine!
Get him!
Okay, so you will find on page 35 of your lesson notes booklet this table here, and it has the sport or the leisure or the pastime in the left hand column, and it has two key features of in the right hand column. So leisure pursuits are sporting activities that people engaged in but weren't necessarily spectator sports. They weren't pursuits that people went to watch. They were just things that you played with your friends, with other people who enjoy those games. They weren't something that people would go and watch you play. And obviously spectator sports, sports where there would be people watching and people might be betting on that sport, etc. So in a moment, you're going to pause this. You're going to read the information that comes before the table. So you read the information on page 32, and on to 33 about leisure pursuits and spectator sports, and then jot down in the right-hand column 2 key features for each. Okay, so pause this and off you go. Okay, welcome back. Here are some of the things that you should have got in your notes. So, in terms of leisure pursuits, they were quite different based on class. So obviously noblemen are doing things like real tennis and fencing and hunting and things that really require you to have a certain amount of wealth to be able to participate in these pursuits. So a key feature of some of these pursuits is that they are played by they are engaged in by different social classes. But there were some pursuits like wrestling and swimming, etc., that were engaged in and enjoyed by all social classes. It's just that they didn't actually mix together. You wouldn't have a nobleman wrestling with a common man. That wouldn't happen. Then, in terms of lower class sport, so we have football that we watched a little humorous clip about. Football was very much a lower class sport. It's not something that noblemen would engage in. Spectator sports like bear baiting and cockfighting, one of the key features of this was that all social classes enjoyed them. All social classes would watch. And the other key feature of it is that there was a lot of betting on these events. So people bet on which cockerel was going to win, or they bet for how long the bear would last when it was being baited, that sort of thing. So they were enjoyed by all social classes, and people gambled on these spectator sports. Right, now we're going to move on to the next part of the table, which looks at Elizabethan pastimes. The things that people did in their spare time to pass the time, things like literature and theatre and music and dancing. And we're going to focus here, first of all, on the theatre. I'm going to show you a little clip here which explains what Elizabethan theatre was like. So watch the clip and consider some key features of Elizabethan theatre.
What was it like going to the theatre when William Shakespeare was writing plays?
And so everyone according to his cue.
We can take a pretty good guess because here in London is a reconstruction of the Globe Theatre, the theatre Shakespeare himself helped to pay for when it was built in 1599.
In Shakespeare's time, more than 200,000 people lived in London. 20,000 of them would go to the theatre every week, despite the weather, which gives you an idea of how popular it was.
Even in the wind and the rain, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor. Everybody wanted to go to the theatre because it was the most exciting entertainment of its day.
See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Ow! That I wore a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek.
Theatres were open to the elements, but even if it snowed, plays made fantastic things seem real, and Londoners couldn't get enough of it.
So here we are.
It's magnificent.
This is the Globe.
It's amazing.
Bigger than you thought?
It is actually.
Yeah.
I thought
Quite
it would be a bit
amazing,
smaller.
isn't it? You think that in Shakespeare's day it may well have held up to 3,000 people.
Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind.
We have 600-700 people standing in this yard. There's a fantastic atmosphere, because when you stand, you have all this energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why children sit at desks at school, to stop them having energy. So when you stand, you've got quite an uncontrollable energy. So people didn't stand like this as if they were at church. They moved around. And they allowed their motions to go.
Just like the modern theatre, how comfortable you were and what sort of view you had depended on how much money you could afford to spend.
Who would be down here?
Shakespeare called them the groundlings, and they paid a penny and they stood on the ground. They were groundling. And that was the cheapest place. It was probably the equivalent of about £6 or £7 today. So even cheaper than going to the cinema, right? So this was real popular entertainment. It was like a game. It was a playhouse. It was a house for play. So it was quite cool. I mean, I think sometimes in theatres today, you see classes of children and they're thinking, how can I get out without my teacher noticing? I think in Shakespeare days, how can I get in without my teacher noticing? It's really good.
And who else would be filling the seats in the theatre?
As you went higher up, you paid more money. At the top, you were actually removed from the smelly yard.
Oh no.
Sometimes the groundlings were called penny stinkards, right? So the higher you went, the higher you were in society. But the most expensive seats were up there, what we call the Lord's Rooms.
So the audience were allowed to sit behind the stage. Wouldn't they not just get the view of an actor's head?
They might do, but the point is they could be seen. Okay, so you could, look
They
at
were
the
showing
royal way.
off.
They were a bit of showing off. It was a bit...
All the actors who worked at the Globe were known as the Lord Chamberlain's men when Queen Elizabeth I was alive. When she died and King James VI of Scotland became King James I of England, they changed their name to the King's Men.
And that's the thing, they all were just men, all of them. Women didn't act in Shakespeare's day. It was thought to be unladylike and just not done. But that meant all the women's parts were played by men.
So, how did the men play women's parts? Well, I'm about to find out.
Well, we need to sit you down first of all, because the stockings will fall down if we don't add something to them. They've got no elastic. Cross garter, under your knee, over the knee, and then ties on. Pair of shoes.
Yeah.
These are deerskin, pinked through with a little pattern on them. One of the shape changes. Well, it actually gives you a very false figure. It's not really very feminine.
This is bizarre.
Hips and bum.
Hips and bum. Okay, give me my bum.
And this will make a sort of conical shape.
Okay, we've got a petticoat going on.
This is called a partlet.
Partlet, okay.
And it's got a little bit of lace trimming on it.
Okay, waistcoat. Sounds manly. Oh my goodness.
So you've been working out, haven't you? We can get away with using this, and I think it will create the look. So, Ricky, there you go.
I'm dying to see how I look, Callum.
I mean, it's not a perfect fit.
It's not. I'm not sure about the hat, to be honest. I think I'd prefer a wig.
Just like today, when we watch TV and movies, Shakespeare's audiences wanted to see amazing things happen.
For I must now to Oberon.
If you're sitting somewhere like where we are now, you can't really see that there's a trapdoor in the ceiling.
When shall we three meet again?
And you can't really see that there's a trapdoor in the floor. So if some devils emerge from the hell area underneath the stage, they'd emerge with puff of smoke and loud banging noises. Or you might see a god being lowered from the stage canopy, and that would be quite spectacular as well, with fantastic costumes and makeup.
Shakespeare's plays at the Globe were as much about showmanship and excitement as they were about beautiful writing and great stories.
The amazing thing about Shakespeare, we've got these great big books full of plays. I sometimes think it's almost like you've got a special magnifying glass where you can look into this time in the past and see how people thought and behaved. You can come to a place like this and see it acted out in front of you.
Hail, King of Scotland! Hail, King of Scotland!
I think it's pure magic.
So what you need to do now is go back to your table. This time focus on theatre and focus on literature and on music and dancing, and write down 2 key features of these in the right hand column, or on your own piece of paper with your own notes if you're doing it in a slightly different way. Whichever way you're doing it, you need to have some key features of literature, theatre, music and dancing. Right, so the important thing to note in terms of the key features of this element of Elizabethan pastimes, leisure activities, is that literature was developing and was very popular, but again, it's popular with upper classes. You can't enjoy literature if you can't read. So by definition, literature was more of an upper class pastime, reading. However, the theatre appeal to all social classes. And we saw in that example answer, 4-mark answer at the end of the last lesson, when we were doing our 4-mark answer on education, we used the 4-mark answer on the theatre as an example, that it was increasingly the theatre open to all social classes. All social classes enjoyed it. Lower class people would pay a small fee and go and stand by the stage, whereas upper class people, noblemen, gentry, they would have their own private boxes. They would have good seats, sometimes even seats behind the stage, overlooking the stage. And this theatre and the explosion in theatre going was accompanied with different types of theatre. People were getting bored of the old religious plays, and some more secular plays and comedies and tragedies that, like the ones that Shakespeare wrote, were very, very popular. If you think about music and dancing, music very important. The noble children were taught to play instruments. People liked to listen to musical troupes, little bands. This was true of whether it was upper class or lower class. They wouldn't necessarily listen to music together, and they wouldn't dance together, but all social classes would enjoy music and dancing, and it was something that people did in their spare time to entertain themselves and as part of parties and social gatherings. And so that brings us to the end of lesson 15. It's a relatively brief lesson. There is only so much that you need to know on sports and leisure and pastimes. The important thing is that you're able to describe key features, because that is the type of question that you are most likely to be asked. What's the key features of this particular sport or leisure or theatre or literature or pastime? So that was lesson 15, which means until next time and until lesson 16, enjoy yourself, take care, stay safe, goodbye.